morning, everybody, and welcome. After all the months and weeks and hype of getting ready for the show, we're finally here, Licensing Expo 2013. I'm Charles Riato, president of Lima, and I'm very pleased and proud to welcome you to what will surely be the world's most exciting and dynamic licensing trade show ever, or at least until next year anyway. This year, we've got more of everything, more exhibitors, more visitors, a great beach party coming up tonight, and just a very, very exciting show that will surely reflect the dynamic image of our growing global industry. And I'm very happy to kick things off today with a panel of 4 of our industry's most influential VIPs, representing major segments of our industry, such as fashion, entertainment, and retail. So, without any further delay, I'd like to introduce Lima's SVP of Information and Communications, Marty Brochstein, who will introduce you to the panel, and I'm sure you're going to find it to be just extremely informative and very worthwhile for your time to be here. So thank you, have a great show, and I'll see you later.
Actually, I don't need that. Thank you, Charles, and thanks everybody for getting up early on a Vegas morning. We applaud your industriousness. Briefly, I'm not going to spend much time on introductions. I'm not going to do titles or anything, but from your far left, we have Henry Stupp of Cherokee, Josh Silverman of Disney, Brad Globe of Warner Brothers Consumer Products, and Andy Prince of Walmart. We welcome you. Thank you for participating in this. And we've moderately planned a discussion about various facets of the business. It's a business of a lot of moving parts. There's the product end, there's the rights end, the retail end, and those dynamics are constantly changing. So just want to start off asking Henry to talk about that relationship among the retailers and the brand owners and the suppliers, and what the dynamics are and how those things are transforming.
Well,
so, everyone.
First of all, thank you, Marty, for having us here. I appreciate it. I joined Cherokee about 2.5 years ago. When I first joined, the question that I was asked most often by our partners around the world is, where are you going to be creating value in the future? We had seen an evolution over about 4 decades from a traditional licensing platform where there was a licensor and they had a licensee who produced a specific category of product for specific channel distribution and sold to a tier of retail. And then several years later, Cherokee created this concept called DTR, where they basically eliminated the manufacturing, worked directly with retail partners. And the decision was made to really tap into the retailer's knowledge of who their customers are, leverage their resources, their supply chain. And we've recently seen in our company an evolution to what we call licensing 3.0, where we've embedded ourselves with the retailer. I know several, Disney, Warners have offices in various cities working closely with their partners. And the reason we chose to follow this route is because, like you said, there are more moving parts than ever before. It's become more complicated than ever before. And from our perspective, we had to take ownership of many facets of our business by leveraging the information we were getting from our partners, the information we would get through qualitative studies, quantitative studies on our customers and who was buying our product and why they were buying our product. And by really becoming engaged and not necessarily turning the keys over to our licensees, we found that we've evolved and have become a better company today that's collaborating in long-term strategic planning of our product, our line architecture, the countries from which we source product, which is a real hot topic right now, and then taking that approach and making it a complete 360-degree concept where we can not only use the information we get from our partners, design the product, develop a more enhanced in-store experience, develop the marketing materials, and make sure that they all fit well together. 4, nice slices of a pie that we can bring together into a 360-degree approach. And then our particular challenge is how do we take that to the world, and make sure that the brand DNA is consistent. And that's what our team, and they're all sitting over there, so I always say hi. Working together with them, we wanted to bring it to the 50 countries that we market on a consistent basis, which over the last 2 years we're very pleased to have been able to do.
Yeah, I mean the rest of you, DTR is part of your business. It's to varying degrees. How do you see the dynamics evolving in terms of your business? Any of you, please feel free.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just comment. I think I agree with Henry. The sort of the synergies that you need to have and the symbiotic relationship that needs to be recognized relative to a brand owner, licensor, or licensee, and retail is more apparent today and more material than I think ever before. I think that communication is absolutely critical. Sharing learnings is absolutely critical. Thinking about what is right for the consumer, putting the consumer really at the center of everything you do. I mean, we're Disney Consumer Products, we're Warner Consumer Products. This consumer has to be at the center of what we're trying to accomplish. Leveraging the learnings, leveraging those insights, really thinking about what works, what doesn't, and sort of feeding that back through sort of the cycle to ensure that we have SKU productivity, you avoid SKU proliferation, high-performing space, better targeted marketing, higher ROI. I mean, at the end of the day, you want to deliver value to the consumer. You want to leverage your franchise value, you want to leverage the content, and you want to deliver to the consumer what they want, what they think they want, what we know they want, what their unmet needs are, what their purpose is. And so really stepping back and sort of having great communication and dialogues, to Henry's point, long-term planning. Take a look at your content slate, what's coming, how are you going to support it, in what ways, et cetera, et cetera. I think that is absolutely a critical step and really necessary, given sort of the complexity and competitive set of today's retail environment.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. The scale that we're having to work on with these properties, you work for a large multinational entertainment company as we work for, that do billions of dollars a year or spending hundreds of millions of dollars to produce movies, market those movies. Everything, the scale, I started in this business in '81, and I look at where we've come, how much money is being invested, the level of expertise, the sort of global nature of our business. The organization that I'm fortunate enough to work for, in terms of the people that we have that have been there anywhere from, I'm one of the newer people, I've only been there for 8 years, but we have people who've been there 15, 20, 25 years who have a level of expertise in retail, marketing. This didn't really exist 20 years ago. You went out, you did a license, the manufacturer distributed the product, you got a little bit involved in retail. That's just not the business we exist. To be successful today, the licensor has to be involved in every aspect. When we're creating a movie, we're starting 15 months in advance. The movie's just barely getting going. We have to create a style guide that will be able to be used in a period of a few months, distributed to our licensees worldwide so they can manufacture the products. We can get them approved. We have to, at the same time, be putting together our retail promotions. We have to figure out what the right product is, what the SKUs are. Every retailer, Andy will attest to this, wants exclusivity in certain areas. So you think about the sort of executional levels and the sort of infrastructures that you need to execute on a global basis is certainly nothing like I experienced when I first entered the business. And the scale of companies like ourselves, Walmart, Mattel, for us to generate the kind of profitability that our companies are looking for us, that's not to say that everybody has to have that scale. There are many properties that do very nice business, private companies, entrepreneurs. There's always going to be room and places for those kinds of properties. But in this area, when you're working for an entertainment company and you're dealing with major manufacturers and a company like Walmart that does, in excess of $300 billion a year, unless you can scale up, it's very difficult to sort of compete in that area.
Yeah, Andy, you're one of the biggest changes I've seen in the business over the time I've been involved has been the amount of interaction between the licensors and retailers. That used to be left in the hands of the manufacturers and suppliers. How do you fit into that middle? How does that factor into your business?
Yeah, I think from the retailer's perspective, it's about how quick you can move also. And so, there's so many properties out there nowadays, and, we want to have what the customer is looking for in the stores, but it requires you to work very quickly. And not only from the retailer standpoint, but from the licensor standpoint, from the manufacturer standpoint, because, properties are coming and going so quick that we have to work very quickly. And, the customer is very fickle. And, we're going to talk more about it later about, all the different ways that, the customer is communicated to, but we just have to figure out how to move quicker in the environment and, have what the customer wants.
Let me follow up on that. And, Brad, you sort of opened up, the media environment and the changes that have come over time, how consumers are exposed to brands, how they connect with properties. Can multiple properties be created without traditional TV/theatrical as a major part of the mix? Why hasn't there been another Angry Birds yet? Where is the digital piece of this? Can you talk about the media landscape and how that factors into everything you're doing?
We're in the midst, excuse me, we're in the midst of a digital, revolution. It affected music, now it's affecting entertainment. How people want to get their entertainment, the amount of options that they have, whether it's streaming, Netflix, going on iTunes. I was reading a statistic the other day where there are 20 billion consumers in America watch 20 billion video clips in a month. So you think about 20 years ago where, basically you watched television, you went to the movies. I mean, those were the options, right? So now you have this landscape where consumers, my daughter, kids, they just have access to things. And therefore, I think on some level, you will see things like Angry Birds. We saw Annoying Orange. We just saw Mattel do Monster High through a digital sort of exercise. So I'm very excited about the digital landscape, but the challenge is how do you break through all of that clutter and rise to the level where we can go have a conversation with Andy and his colleagues and be able to deliver programs that he can count on that are going to be here in 6 months or a year, and so what you see is once something becomes a digital phenomenon, it needs to go into the more traditional mediums of television and movies if it's going to sustain itself. I'm really excited about the digital space. I think it's going to give us, besides just doing movies and TV shows, which are unbelievably expensive, take time to produce in terms of a high quality, to be able to create digital assets and then work with our partners. We can do it more quickly, we can do it more efficiently, we can do it more strategically, and so I think that's going to become part of the mix for those of us who own IP. And we're internally already working on some things that we're very excited about. And look, this is here. This is the world we live in now. But in itself, it's hard for just a digital asset or a digital property to have a longevity. But once it reaches a certain level, then I think it can translate into other forms of entertainment and then become a successful licensing property.
I think I agree tremendously. I think the interesting thing, if you look at Angry Birds, and you think about Rovio, and there were 30 or 40 or 50 other executions prior to that, and that didn't hit that level, sort of social conscience or zeitgeist or whatever you want to call it. I think if you look at Angry Birds, a really interesting thing, I think that we could all relate to, it's driven certainly by a great game, a really interesting game, great engine, but it's character and storytelling, not to sound sort of too romantic at 8:30 on a Tuesday morning, but there's a soul to the character, there's a story to the character. You're interested in why are those pigs so angry, and why are those birds so angry, and what's going on with those? There's a sort of a story arc to it, so that really separates it from some of the other successful games like a Temple Run or a Cut the Rope or a Fruit Ninja, which are great games in their own right, but they don't have that level of sort of DNA or soul to them, that character storytelling. I think that's a really critical piece to the success of Angry Birds. And again, I agree with Brad. It's critical that to go from the digital platform into a broader distribution platform, really more of a content ecosystem in order to sort of, milk all the value out of the property, out of the franchise. And if you think about, some of where the business is going, my perspective, at least Disney's perspective, is a holistic approach to content where people can consume the content that they want to consume irrespective of where they are. They're not tethered to a TV. They don't have to be sitting in front of a computer. It's mobile devices. It's on the go. It's on the fly. So if it's television animation, which is still critical, or live action TV is important, theatrical, tentpole films, you get the marketing benefit on TV. Obviously, you get the reach and frequency. Digital is easy to consume. Mobile is increasingly more important. It's a very interesting dynamic time in the media space where you can see sort of the robustness through interactive gaming, print, digital publishing, and on. You want to have that holistic content ecosystem so people can enjoy your IP in a way that 5 or 10 years ago they could not.
You really hit on something, and entertainment so much is still about storytelling, telling good stories. Steven Spielberg mentioned something the other day because they asked him, why haven't more video games as successful as they are translated into big sort of licensing opportunities? And he said the one thing still missing in the game and is the storytelling aspect and connecting that to the consumer. A lot of explosions, a lot of action, a lot of violence that sort of seems to drive that business, but not as much in terms of storytelling that is done, in traditional entertainment.
Yeah. In this fractured audience environment, what kind of metrics can be used? We were talking backstage that the top-rated TV show today, with the numbers it generates, would have gotten canceled 15 years ago. The audience is so fragmented and fractured. How do you, as you're looking at properties, evaluate the success or failure and what you want to be identified with?
Well, and I think it's very difficult. And Brad, you've heard me tell this story many times, but back when I was a kid, you get up on Saturday morning and there was 4 stations to choose from. It was ABC, NBC, CBS, and there was a local station. And I get up early and watch Johnny Quest, and so now you think
How many people know who Johnny Quest is?
Right. There's a few.
All
Come
right,
on.
Good.
And so,
I read about it on the internet.
And so, when you think about today and all the different forms of communication coming at a child, whether it be over 100 TV stations or, on cable and the internet and everything else, I think it's just, what we're seeing in toys is that kids are taking small bites out of properties and they're moving quickly onto something else. Mm-hmm. And so with Angry Birds, I'm sure there'll be another Angry Birds. It's a phenomenon, but I think there'll be another one. And what's happening there is, it's quick, it's simple, and it's inexpensive. Mm-hmm. And so the kids are getting engaged, and then they're moving on to something else. And so that's kind of what we're seeing happening on the toy side. But it's really tough to monitor. And the other side is how deep do you get into a property before the kids lose interest? And then we have all the inventory. So yeah. that's a challenge as well.
Oh, there's that. And Henry, from the brand perspective, the fractured media environment makes, I would assume makes it tougher to establish a brand and get a brand story out there, or does it in fact make it easier because you have so many different ways to do that communication?
Well, for us, it was really identifying who we are, what we do, what the DNA is of our brand, and staying true to it. We're always going to have to compete for rack space when an Angry Birds comes up. Retailers, I always say, every time there's a new opportunity, you don't see retailers adding more racks. There's a certain number of racks, that's it. And so when an Angry Bird comes up and you're getting a high rate of sale, it's gonna dip into the other brands and other competing licenses that are on the floor. Mm-hmm. And we just have to not adjust our brand to counter program against an Angry Birds, because we know it's going to exist. What we have to do is stay true to our offering, know that there's a place, and when something like Angry Birds comes up, we say, buy the t-shirt, it goes really nicely with our Cherokee jeans. and we just look at it that way, and we support it because it drives traffic to the stores, mm-hmm. and that's the most important thing today. And you mentioned an interesting thing about, your question of why isn't there another Angry Birds? And I heard Howard Rothman years ago say this at a Lucasfilm event. He said there are really 2 things that are guaranteed in licensing. I think he said except the minimum guarantee. There are two things that are guaranteed, and that was there will always be another major property. That's a guarantee. And the other thing he said, and I'm paraphrasing, so if you're here, I'm sorry. He said we probably won't see it coming. Mm-hmm. And I've always remembered that because it's so true. We were talking about Pokemon, how when we took that license, and we were laughed out the doors when we first did the rounds in Canada. I'll never forget retailers looking at us saying, "This is going to be big for boys. He's yellow," and it became a phenomenon. And then we watched other things try and mirror it, mimic it, and they didn't work. And we've seen other things that have tried to copy Angry Birds, and they haven't worked. But there will be something. There is always something.
I think I agree with what you're saying, but the thing that's a bit unfortunate, having been in the industry a long time, because I agree with you that for so many years, every year we saw some new property come from somewhere, Furby or just Pokemon. I mean, like every year it just came from somewhere. You didn't know where it was coming from. And I've talked to a few, my colleagues and others in the industry, and you're just seeing less of that. And part of it, I think, is because of how quickly kids are moving in and out of things. You're talking about television only getting a certain level of rating, how quickly movies, I mean, you could do $400 million on a movie and it'll do 70% of its business in 2 or 3 weeks. Right. So, when I was involved in Jurassic Park, I was back in '93, at the time it was the highest grossing movie of all time, did $1 billion in retail sales. People saw that coming, it was great. That summer, the only competitive movie was Last Action Hero, which turned out not to be competitive. And we played for the entire summer into the fall, and properties had a chance, and this is the thing that was good, and I think Andy would agree, retailers could try properties. Like they had enough confidence to at least give it shelf space and give it an opportunity to succeed. And I think one of the challenges now, with the scale that we're kind of operating at, there's very little room for error. So you have to bet on those things that has is a brand that has a track record, both in terms of the entertainment, in terms of the product sales, and can drive a certain amount of revenue. And when you can't get to that criteria, it's very difficult to get the shelf space. I had an animated sequel a few years ago on a movie, did very well the first one, was absolutely an adorable property. We had pretty high expectations. We were realistic, I think, as much as licensing people can be realistic about their properties. And I went to Walmart, this wasn't Andy, it was another buyer, selling vigorously as, hey, this is great. Unfortunately, it was coming out in the fourth quarter, so here's another issue. You come out in the fourth quarter, it's the most expensive shelf space. They have to put the properties on the shelf that are going to do the most volume. There's a finite amount of space, and my property, our property, was not going to drive a sufficient revenue compared to other opportunities that Walmart had. It wasn't that they didn't like the movie, thought the product was good, so we had to go into a different, specialty. We couldn't do as much. So oftentimes too, it's just about how you roll it out, what the timing is, what the competitive factors are. There's a lot of things involved when you're going to sell a property that may influence what the success is.
Yeah, and to that storytelling point, Josh, you came up through the Marvel side, and I've had conversations with people about Spider-Man. When the first Spider-Man movie came out, it was part of the Marvel family. But if that first movie hadn't been a really good movie, we would not have Spider-Man 2 and 3 and 5. I don't know where it ends, but
it's going to keep on going.
Yeah. So establishing that track record and is really an important part of the business.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you need something to spark, right? You need to start the fire, but then it really takes a sort of a concerted, concentrated, deliberate effort to breathe, sort of oxygen to that fire to make it more combustible. So again, I go back to you need to step back and think about how do you holistically sort of create content offerings that complement each other, transmedia opportunities, what have you, so that there's more there. I mean, when you sit with retail, it's not just there's a movie, it's an event film, and you're out. It's not going to cut it today. It's just not. And so you know, if you look at Avengers, by way of example, there was a television show prior to the film, there's a new television show post-film, then there was the film did pretty good. Again, there's print,
Really?
it did okay. And I love, by the way, that, you know, we have Iron Man and Superman sitting next to each other in the morning. It's nice.
So we sort of really characterize.
But then you get your print.
Notice how we're staying out of the fray.
That's right. But it's all love. It's all superheroes. It's all superheroes. So you want that. You want all the different touch points, right? You want to provide if there's something there, you want to be able to provide it to the consumer and ultimately the customer in a way that makes sense to them. And so you have to, you know, you got to place bets and you got to believe in what your creative is. But it starts with, as I said in the beginning, it starts with the story. It starts with the creative. That's the spark.
And I think it's easier also with an established property like a Spider-Man or you know, Superman, something like that, you know, the customer understands who that character is. You know, I think back to when Cars came out the first time, and you know, it was brand new, and you know, it sold right from the very beginning just because they were so cute. Mm-hmm. And I mean, the kids loved them, but I think it's much more difficult when you have something that's not established out there, and then they don't know, you know, like a Spider-Man. But then on the other hand, I think it also becomes a challenge when you start going into the second and third Spider-Man. What's new? Mm-hmm. You know, what's the new news? And especially from a kid's standpoint,
right.
That, you know, if I got the web shooting glove last time, you know, I'm probably not going to buy it this time. And so then, you know, what's new in those properties also to keep it going?
Again, I agree 100%. And that's where you need to start to inject it with the innovation. And innovation comes in many forms. Sometimes, these days, innovation, everyone just simply assumes technology. And that's okay. And technology is our friend, and we should embrace the technology. But innovation, to your point, could be just another great type of role-play toy, or a really unique dress-up or a role-play item, or what have you. I mean, it's just, you need to constantly innovate within the line in order to breathe fresh life into it in and out of the movie cycles in order to have that sort of constant growth. You don't want the peak and valley. You don't want, you know, sort of the ebb and flow. You want nice, straight, flat lines, predictable business. That's good for us. It's good for the licensees. It's good for the retailers. And ultimately, it's good for the consumers. But innovation is critical.
I think the other thing we at Warner Brothers have really worked hard on in our group is trying to extend the brands to opportunities outside of retail as well, whether it's theme parks. Harry Potter sort of had a great run, as you all know, and we were fortunate to enter into a relationship with Universal, just had built an amazing event in Florida, and now we're building a number of other parks with them. So that really is going to continue the brand and continue the experience, tremendous sort of revenue generator for our company and our division. Even here in Las Vegas, you'll walk around and you'll see sort of our IP on slot machines, and it's become a tremendous business for us. So, you know, there are other things that we have to look at to extend our brands. And, you know, we're also, the economies are still challenging in developed countries, whether it's here or in Europe. These are pretty developed, very mature markets. So we're also now looking at emerging markets in Russia and China and India. And, you know, that's the other way that we're going to continue to grow, you know, our franchises. Mm-hmm.
You know, we're talking, you know, we have Warner Brothers and Disney, you know, the megas of this world. And the thought occurred to me, you know, as we're sitting here, not everybody out here is with the Warner Brothers and Disneys of the world. How does a smaller company, a smaller property break through, you know, at a place like Walmart, or does it have to establish a track record someplace else before it comes to you?
Well, I think it's really tough. But you know, you look at, and you know, Rovio's not a small company, but you know, when they first got started, nobody really knew who they were, and so I mean, it is possible to get started. I think you've got to have something new. You have to have something fresh. You have to have something innovative. And then, you know, it has to be priced right for the consumer also, you know, and it needs to be of value. So I think, you know, it's a difficult road, but it is one that you'll see companies out there that, you know, will come from nowhere. And so it is possible. I think it's just, you know, it's a tough proposition, though.
Yeah.
I think the conclusion is listening to what's being said is it started, you know, Rovio and Angry Birds started with a really good property. And as importantly, the products being developed by the licensees delivered as well. They extended the whole concept. you know, from our perspective, we're really a product-driven entity today. And while you can have you can have a great movie, and you can have a great video game, but if you don't deliver on the product side of it, quality that's engaged, that stands for something, you're also going to see a shorter life cycle on the brand. And you know, there's been some incredible brands that I've witnessed over the last 25 years that didn't make it because the product execution wasn't there. And I've also seen some, you know, great products that far exceeded the concept because it captured the consumer's attention. And now it gets a little tricky as well because you have this whole social environment where consumers are now talking to each other. So it's not as simple as, you know, I'm the studio or I'm the big fashion company and I'm telling you what to buy and what to wear, or I'm the retailer and if I'm carrying it, it must be important. Now you've got this whole new dynamic where the consumers are saying amongst themselves, this is important. You know, look at it. They're doing YouTube videos of, you know, playing with their lightsabers or the Angry Birds or, you know, our summer dresses that consumers are putting them on and saying, I bought this, you know, for $15 at Target and they love it. And next thing I know, there's a run on a dress. And that has nothing to do with what Target's doing. And, you know, it's not certainly anything that we're doing. The consumers have taken upon themselves and they've created their own new loop. And that's really impacting what breaks through. And, you know, I'm always cautious about price as well. I'm not a big believer in driving prices down. I think you have to deliver on something that can stand the test of time. You know, I call it the race to the bottom, and no one wins that.
Yeah. Part of that social media conversation sometimes isn't so pleasant. We have the whole supply chain issue that you made reference to earlier that's been in the news at various points over the past few months. And I'd love to kind of address that. Josh, Disney was kind of out front on a lot of the news. Could you discuss the way you approach supply chain and how that's changing?
Yeah, I think it's you know, it's clearly an important topic, and you know, whatever companies decide relative to some of the complexities, supply chain, international labor standards, and on, you know, I think it's each individual company, and Disney's a brand, and we have to do what we believe is in the best interest of our brand and our shareholders. We made a decision, we stand by it, and we, you know, we're going to continue to stand by it. But supply chain as a whole, and that's really the brand side, but supply chain as a whole is an increasingly important consideration. And supply chain capabilities in choosing new partners, onboarding new partners, or existing partners, given sort of the dynamic and sort of transformational nature of what's happening in retail today is really much more important today than I think it's ever been. And so, you know, you think about it, is clearly you want a partner, you want a supply chain that is contracted, expeditious. They're able to deliver on time, we're able to replenish on time. An empty peg, an empty slot is bad for us, it's bad for the licensee, it's bad for the retailer, again, bad for the consumer. You want partners with supply chains that are flexible enough to deliver good, better, best quality and deliver into various channels of distribution with their good, better, best quality, irrespective of price points. You want supply chains that are able to be adapted, right? They can adapt to some of the new emerging retailers in Amazon with the e-com side, or Costco on the club side. The way they want to, you know, have products delivered to them is very different than some of the other key accounts and large mass market retailers. Supply chains need to be able to adapt to be able to, you know, facilitate and satisfy those obligations. And then, of course, you know, the fourth one I would say is the brand one, which is you need to ensure, and this is the most critical as far as we're concerned, Disney. There needs to be a responsible supply chain, and it's beyond the labor standards. It touches on product integrity and product safety. It touches on ethical issues. It touches on security. It touches on environmental. It runs the gamut, and those four components ultimately are much more critical thought process and dynamic thought process we have today relative to the partner. They might have a great core competency. They may make the highest quality product. They might have fantastic distribution, retail relationships, but if their supply chain cannot satisfy the needs that we have and the retailer has, it's a consideration.
How do you approach, you know, in terms of your suppliers? You know, the news out of Bangladesh really struck a lot of people hard, and it plays into that. You know, now that the consumer is so much more aware of things like that and have the ability to communicate with each other, not to reduce it to PR, but in the public stance of a company, it's moving more front and center than it ever has before.
Look, there are good factories in a lot of countries, and there are bad factories in a lot of countries, including right here at home. And what's happened in Bangladesh is horrible, and it's scary, and there is no easy solution to it. The fact is that you cannot take that bulk of business that's being done in Bangladesh, move it out and drop it into another country. Our belief is that Bangladesh is not going to go away as a supplier of our merchandise. We have a responsibility to make sure that we are identifying the best factories. We have monitors in many of our factories there, and make sure that they're RAP certified. Obviously, we're doing, applying more focus and attention to every factory that's making our product. There's 175 factories around the world producing our brands, and we're really focused in on making sure that they're the right ones. But everyone's talking about moving from Bangladesh to Cambodia, but Cambodia has 20% of the output of Bangladesh. It's not going to happen. And mark my words, in 5 years from now, there'll be more production in Bangladesh than there is today. It's not going to go away. And every company, like you said, has to make the right decisions for themselves. We've chosen to support it and make it better. Mm-hmm. And that's what many retailers around the world have chosen to do. And I think we have that responsibility. But it extends all the way through the food chain. Consumers have to be willing to pay more. Retailers have to be willing to pay a little bit more to make sure. We want to obviously provide the best possible quality in an ethically compliant factory, and that's been our focus. But we're going to support the country, mm-hmm. and just make sure that we're working with really great factories.
Yeah. I mean, Andy and Brad, you have clauses in your contracts, in your mm-hmm. agreements, in your licensing agreements, and in your supplier agreements, Andy, relating to supply chain issues. How often do those really come into play, the monitoring?
I think, from our standpoint, some of the biggest challenges, and again, we want to have what the customer is looking for every day. And I think some of the biggest challenges that we have with supply chain would be, with the quantities that we go through. I mean, we have to work much earlier, mm-hmm. and, place the orders earlier and get, there's less factories out there now. There's testing involved. I mean, there's all these different factors, labor issues that you mentioned. And so, it requires all of us to work much earlier in the whole process. And, not only from the retailer standpoint, but from the manufacturer standpoint. I mean, it requires that we see product earlier also. We have to see product much earlier. We have to work much earlier than we have in the past, just to make sure that we can support and work through the supply chain issues to get products to the stores.
Mm-hmm. Brad?
I concur with my colleagues. I think it's a critical sort of element that we have to look at. It is our responsibility when you're a large company such as ourselves to make sure that the products are being manufactured under the right kind of conditions. But I agree with what was said, which is it's everybody's responsibility, because it goes to what the consumer is willing to pay, what the retailer sells the product at. We're trying to deliver, the kinds of things that consumers want. On the other hand, if you're in the business that we are with very high-profile brands, it's something we have to be very conscious of, because something like this can just, the unfortunate thing of the terrible accident that occurred and the damage that it did, that's the most important thing. But then also, you just don't want to be involved. You don't want your brands to, right. Because we're the first people that, frankly, they're going to go to and sort of make an example of.
Yeah, Andy mentioned a couple times speed to market, and this. How much has that become a factor in some of your supply chain decisions as to how quickly things can actually get to the shelf as consumer tastes change?
Yeah, it's more critical now than ever before. There's advantages on speed to market. Even if a retailer would take a slightly lesser margin, getting a shorter window of opportunity. We see a big trend in insourcing as opposed to outsourcing. We look at an example of denim, where right now, we have to place our denim business 8-9 months in advance when we're dealing in China or Bangladesh or India. And yet, we're seeing a trend now where we can move it to Mexico. The margin for the retailer would be less. However, they would have less exposure on the inventory, therefore less markdowns. So we could bring it closer, they can make the same amount of money, we could have tighter delivery time frames, arguably more control because it's right in our backyard. And so that's a trend that we're going to witness more and more in the Pacific Basin, in the Caribbean, in Mexico. I think Mexico is about to hit a huge growth spurt. And I think right here at home in the United States, I think that there's a lot of opportunity. Surprisingly, American Apparel has turned themselves around to a degree. And, it's a testament to the fact that there is a demand for made in USA products, and people are willing to pay for it. And we're starting to see it for the first time. Walmart's doing a whole made in USA initiative, and people will pay for it. You just have to put it out there. And the product has to stand up.
Josh, I see you nodding a lot on the whole speed to market issue.
Sure. Yeah.
Is that factoring into some of your licensee decisions?
Absolutely. It's, there's two approaches. There's speed to market relative to content. So historically, Disney, from just speaking in terms of, say, animated television, our Disney Junior block, we'd have waited 18 months from the release of the first episode on any of the Disney platforms to have product in market. That's a really long time. You're into season 2. We've really dialed that back on a strategic level so that we are coming out with product 6 months, maybe sometimes day and date with the show. And that's important. You want to catch it in the hot set. Again, I go back to it's placing a bet on properties that you believe in. And it's clearly paid off for us on Disney Junior. We're very happy with that. But then you move it over to the speed to market on the actual delivery of the goods. Absolutely. You want to get the product in market quickly. But you want to do it in a right-sized approach. So, SKU proliferation, SKU productivity is something we're watching very, very carefully. And we want to ensure, again, communicating with our partners, retailers and licensees, that when we deliver the product, no matter how fast it is, that it sells through. I mean, that's the magic, of course, and then replenishment. So there's this dance that we do, and there's this balance sort of on the head of the pin, but it's working, and it's something that has to absolutely be a consideration for the entire life cycle.
Okay. I wanted to kind of go around our discussion group here and talk about the biggest challenges they see facing their particular segment of the business. What are the, I was going to say problems, but let's call them opportunities to succeed. What are the biggest challenges facing your particular segment? Andy, why don't you?
I think there's a couple of things, and we've kind of touched on them a little bit, but I think the first one would be, maintaining value in what we sell. And so if you look at, what's happening over the past few years, the AURs, or the average unit retails, are increasing out there. And what's happening is unit sales are decreasing in response. And so that's a challenge for us. And so I think, that's something that we need to take a real hard look at. The second piece would be innovation, and we talked about it a little bit earlier, but, bringing innovation into the product. And sometimes, innovation comes in a real simple form. And I brought a couple of examples here to show you. These are little, and Brad, this one's for you.
I appreciate that.
These little 88-cent cups that we sell, we used to sell about 800,000 pieces of those. And, this year, by getting behind it, we're going to sell over 40 million pieces of those cups in the stores. And so, innovation doesn't have to be complicated. It can be very simple, and we can sell a lot of units out there and, a lot of dollars through the registers. And, the other challenge would be, I think, for us is just, from a Walmart perspective, getting us involved in the innovation cycle up front, get us involved to where we have a buy-in, we have an early commitment, and, we'll have a vested interest. So I think, it's innovation and then, really having a value in what we sell.
Okay. Brad, you want to?
Wow. I think just the challenge of our scale is so large now, and the demands when you work. I'm just speaking as somebody who works in a big company. This is the first big company I've ever worked in. My career's been spent more in smaller companies and different scale. And when you work in a very significant company, as we work in, all of us, the pressures to grow your business on a global basis is very challenging because you need this ongoing flow of the right content. And we were just talking about the criteria of what you need to be able to go and have a meeting with Andy and his colleagues in terms of what works for his business, what works for our toy partner. That scale seems to be growing each year in terms of all of our what is expected of us. And which is why, working for a studio, we need this constant commitment to creating, movies and television shows. It's a huge investment. But then just the whole complexities of being able to actually take that IP and actually execute and maximize, as Josh was talking about, it requires an incredible group of people around the world. And I guess that's what kind of keeps me up at night, is just every year knowing that management's going to come back and say, okay, regardless of what my content is, you need to grow your business at a certain level. And it's our job to continue, and that's why we have to innovate. We have to find new sort of ways to extend our IP. And it's one of the reasons why I'm extremely excited, I'll repeat this again, about the digital opportunity. I think the more those of us in the licensing business can get some control over the creation of the content and the distribution of the content, that will help us a lot, because it will supplement all of the things that our studio is doing, which we need always in terms of these big events. But we also need to be able to work with our partners and do other things to fill in between these movies and sort of reach consumers through the ways that they're now interacting with entertainment. And I'm kind of looking forward as a new creative challenge. I think my colleagues are looking forward to it. Our partners are excited about it. And it gives us a bit more control, as opposed to we're waiting, for the movie. When's the movie coming? It's got to be in June.
Where's the one sheet?
Otherwise, I'm not sure what I'm going to be doing next year.
What do you mean you changed the title?
Yeah, we're all constantly trying to adjust. And it's, by the way, making a movie, you're talking about an enterprise that's costing upwards of $150 to $200 million, lots of moving parts, global distribution. I mean, talk about something that is stressful, expensive, pressured.
I mean, you were talking backstage about American Tail, and what was it, $8 million?
I just go back. This is when you know you've been in the business too long, where you start telling those stories. But one of the first things when I started working for Steven in '83, he said, Brad, I really want to get into the animation business. And this was, animation had died. Like, Disney had passed. There was no animation going on, really. Disney had tried a few things that they hadn't worked. So Steven said, Brad, let's get a property. So we found this property. It was American Tail. Some of you may remember, about a Jewish immigrant family escaping from the Cossacks. Big, high concept. You can imagine me today going in and having a conversation with Andy about that property, After he'd stop laughing, he would tell me to go get professional help, But anyways, $8 million to make the movie. And the only reason Universal gave us the money was because it was Steven. And it was about $6 or $7 million to market it. We were fortunate enough to get McDonald's and Sears on board, and they spent more money than we did making and marketing the movie. And it broke the box office record. This is to give you the difference. $55 million, opened up at $10 million, went on to be a very profitable movie. Today, if you don't have an opening weekend, you're going to have a movie this weekend that's going to do far more than $55 million. So it just shows you, you could do something like that, take a concept that seemed crazy almost, to make a movie, get a Spielberg behind it, get a retailer to actually buy a couple million plush, have McDonald's do a $20 million promotion. People were willing to kind of step out. It was just a different time. To make that happen today, I don't think you could do that.
Henry, challenges?
Well, our biggest challenge is You know, we're not on a movie set calendar where we've got an event coming. So we view our biggest opportunity for our company is our organic growth with our namesake brand. We're in 45 countries now. We'll add another dozen countries or so this year. And we believe that our approach is to do the heavy lifting alongside our partners. We're finding many of our partners, our licensees, can no longer take on the responsibility of doing everything themselves anymore. It's slowing them down, actually. And it's our brand, so our view was we should be doing a lot of the work. We should be delivering them as many tools as possible for them to exceed. And we wanted to show them a lot of love in how we engage or in all aspects of their business. So our primary focus right now is organic growth with the Cherokee brand. And there's a lot of opportunity. We can introduce many new categories. You know, we have furniture in Mexico. We have outdoor camping in some countries. We're launching fragrance in the Middle East and in India. And that's over and above, you know, our accessory business is thriving right now. So outside of organic growth, we have new territory growth. And then lastly, all of us would agree, you know, we need to build a portfolio of brands and really leverage the platform that we've created. We have a highly structured product design development team. We've got recognized, dedicated manufacturing resources that we've cultivated and curated to bring the best possible product. And our long-term vision is bring more brands into our portfolio and really leverage all, you know, our team, which you know, I'm lucky I have an incredible team that speaks 20 different languages. So when we conduct our business in each market, we're actually doing business in their language. And that's something that we're really proud of at our end. You know, we've said that bilingualism isn't biculturalism, and we've learned a lot in how to take an American heritage brand and bring that into many markets, even if they don't know what it is. Right. We've seen success, and it's because of the DNA and the authenticity and legitimacy of the product that we're bringing forth. So, you know, we like the future, but it's hard work.
Yeah. Josh?
You know, I think maybe a little bit more tactical. I'm looking a lot lately at sort of declining birth rates in the United States and many other countries, and sort of that relative impact on the toy space holistically, and sort of thinking about the toy business as a whole, to Andy's point, the need to continue to innovate, and then obviously the impact of technology on the toy space. I mean, it's still a very healthy business. Let's not sort of, you know, start writing epitaphs, but it's something that we do need to think about. And I think there's, you know, I said it earlier, you need to embrace technology. And sure, kids are getting older, younger, and that's the reality. And they're plugging and playing like they've never done before. You know, my 3-year-old has her MyPad. It's not an iPad, it's a MyPad. But you need to sort of accept that. And you need to think about how do you take technology and then allow it to complement and enhance the play patterns, the great traditional toys that exist today and will exist for the next 100 years. And that's something that we spent a lot of time thinking about. So there's solutions to some of the challenges, and it ties into a lot of things and a lot of the themes we had talked about, you know, throughout the morning, from innovation on down the line. But that's really sort of where if you sort of on an aggregate level, where I think some of the focus, I think, as an industry should be. That said, I think our industry is incredibly healthy. I mean, if you cannot walk around without seeing something that, you know, some of us have taken part in. So it's a beautiful thing, and maybe I'll be romantic a little later in the morning now, but it's you know, I think the business is healthy, and I think the more that we all work together collaboratively and continue to talk and communicate, I want success for my partners. I want Superman to do well, you know, and that's good for the industry. I want to hear from Andy and understand, you know, some of the challenges and the opportunities he sees, or, you know, from Henry and otherwise. I think having these types of dialogues on stage or behind stage is really very important to keep the dialogues, keep the communications, formal, informal, it doesn't matter. Just business is good.
Yeah, you know, to wrap it up a little bit, Henry made a point earlier about you're not going to see the next hit coming. I think one of the really great parts of this business, and the thing that will be reinforced around that show floor, is that, yeah, you'll see the big properties that you know about and all that, but the magic of this business is to figure out and create something that nobody sees coming that becomes the next mega hit. 3 years ago, nobody knew what an Angry Bird was. And you walked up to somebody and said Angry Birds, and you're just as likely to get a blank stare as some smile of recognition. So I think that's one of the great parts of this business that we're all in. And I would like to thank our panelists for a really great discussion this morning. And I would like to thank all of you for being here. We wish you a great 3 days at the show, and we look forward to seeing you next year too. Thanks a lot and have a great day.